Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and today, my oh my, has the forecast changed. We now have two potential tropical lows toward the end of the 10-day forecast period that could impact Queensland and Western Australia, and also the Northern Territory as well. So we're going to be talking about those later on in the video, but we will start things off, of course, with the thunderstorms that are currently impacting far northern Queensland and will be impacting South Australia and the Northern Territory over this weekend. I'll be giving you a detailed Easter forecast as well, a lot to get through in this extended forecast update today, so make sure you are subscribed and also leave a like on the video while you're at it. You can go into the description and skip around to the timestamps that suit your forecast the best, but without any further ado, let's just get straight into it. Taking a look up north right now with some strong thunderstorms that blew up overnight over the Cape York Peninsula. They did dodge the major population centres of Cairns and Townsville, but still some rainfall has been recorded inland, and when I say some, I do mean a lot. We've had over 100 millimetres in some communities up near around Laura in far northern Queensland, some private weather gauges that have picked up over 500 millimetres so far this week. It has been a very wet one, that's for sure, and you can see on the convective satellite imagery here, which shows how intense the thunderstorms are. Of course, reds, browns and blacks meaning more intense thunderstorms. You can see just how powerful some of these storms were, certainly delivering some very heavy rainfall to areas across far northern Queensland. It certainly was a night of wild storms up there, that's for sure. Now, we are going to be focusing more so on thunderstorms and heavy rainfall over the next few days across Northern Territory and South Australia. You might be able to see this wispy cloud here now moving through the Northern Territory. That's the precursor energy that this afternoon and into this evening is going to be firing up the first round of severe thunderstorms for parts of South Australia. So it is going to be a forecast worth watching if you are from South Australia, that's for sure. But we will first just finish things off with far northern Queensland over the Easter period. They are expecting a pretty significant amount of rainfall on at least Good Friday, probably up towards 100 millimetres for some areas outside of Cairns, and this rainfall will continue into Saturday morning. It's not as much as what was initially expected just a couple of days ago, but still 150 millimetres. It is certainly something worth keeping an eye on, especially with how saturated the grounds are up here. Any more rainfall is just going to go straight into runoff and cause rivers to rise up towards their minor or moderate flooding alerts. It also looks like the rainfall is going to be falling in some strong thunderstorms across parts of the western parts of the Cape York Peninsula and then down towards Mount Isa as well. Again, more rainfall that this part of Queensland just does not need. It's basically every part of tropical Queensland, bar maybe Rockhampton and Mackay, have had too much rainfall this wet season so far, and unfortunately it just isn't an even spread of rainfall. Areas that are desperate for rainfall around Rockhampton, Mackay, down towards Bundaberg, they just haven't been receiving the rainfall that far northern Queensland has been taking up for them. Now, over the next 3 days, as I said, up towards 150 millimetres can be expected around Innisfail and that sort of area. That's kind of the worst case scenario even at this point. So the rainfall forecast has actually gotten a lot better over the past few days. I did have a hunch that the numbers would continue to be decreased over the coming days up towards the Easter long weekend, and it really just looks like Friday evening and into Saturday morning are going to be wet at this time, and it looks like it's actually going to be a clear Easter day up for far northern Queensland. So if you are planning an Easter egg hunt outside Saturday morning, it looks like it could be a good time to do it. It will be humid, it will be that horrible still air, that tropical hot air that is just not budging up there, but it will be fine. It won't be rainy, that's for sure, which is some good news up there, because I bet they are all sick of the rainfall up in far northern Queensland. In fact, some areas have picked up over 5,000 millimetres so far this wet season. A lot of that was from Cyclone Jasper, but Cyclone Kirrily, Cyclone Lincoln, the remnants of Lincoln rather doubling back, they've just had a lot of rainfall up there. It's been really quite extreme this wet season, more resembling of wet seasons back 50 years ago, but even they sometimes don't compare to the rainfall that we have been seeing up in far northern Queensland. That is enough ramble upon the Easter weather up there. We're going to now take a look at the forecast for South Australia and the Northern Territory. I have been talking up this event quite a bit over the past couple of days. There are forecast models, all major forecast models, expecting in excess of 50 millimetres, some daring to suggest up towards 200 millimetres of rainfall to fall from Friday evening, or it will be this evening and into Friday morning when we start to see the first thunderstorms fire up, but they'll be in remote Queensland and New South Wales, maybe extending as far inland as Mumbai, probably not getting into the more heavily populated areas in the central parts of South Australia along the Central Australian highways and so forth. I think calling them heavily populated areas is a bit of a stretch considering remote South Australia has next to no people in it, but you get what I mean. There are population centres still in South Australia, and some of those are expecting a significant amount of rainfall to fall. You can see it's going to be consistent thunderstorms throughout Friday evening and then into Saturday as well, all throughout Saturday by the looks of things. Just looking at these thunderstorms on the forecast right now, it looks like there is a high risk of these storms being severe, especially throughout Saturday evening by the looks of things. We're going to be having heavy rainfall and damaging winds being the main threats, and maybe some large hailstones as well in and out of this area. I'd be saying peak wind gusts probably up towards 110 kilometres an hour from these thunderstorms, certainly enough to snap trees and cause power line downings, might even rip off roofs as well, especially in lesser well-built areas, and the heavy rainfall as well will likely be causing some flash flooding in the tributary rivers towards Lake Eyre. So Lake Eyre certainly is expecting even more rainfall to flow into its catchment from this rainfall event, that's for sure. And it is pretty widespread. It's not just reserved for South Australia, even though that's sort of where the worst of the conditions will be from this thunderstorm event. But there will be thunderstorms extending into Queensland and even up in towards far northern Queensland and the Northern Territory as well. And it is a shame that we don't have good radar coverage in this neck of Australia, because I would love to see what these thunderstorms are. In fact, it is very hard to really tell how the thunderstorms progress in Central Australia, because this is really a grey zone that we have. It'd be fantastic if there was a radar in Birdsville and Tennant Creek. I've said that before actually for the Tennant Creek radar, and I believe they did actually have one in Tennant Creek up until 2015, but if they had one in Tennant Creek and Birdsville, basically Australia would have nationwide coverage apart from a little corner in Western Australia where there's very few people. Again, I know the population it doesn't demand a radar in Birdsville and Tennant Creek because this is definitely one of the most remote sections of Australia. But these dark greys here that extend all throughout Central Australia, they do indicate a grey zone. And it's a shame because Australia, with those radars, would have the best radar coverage of modern nations, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. It probably wouldn't match the Americas radar coverage or some of the radar coverages in Europe, but it would be a standout, and it would provide much better forecasting on the Bureau of Meteorology's part as well. I've also highlighted the possibility, I do apologise, I am just rambling here, but I've highlighted the possibility of putting radars on some of the Coral Sea Island reefs here, not just Willis Island, but some of the other islands as well, in the Coral Sea Islands territory. That would be fantastic, and that would provide Queensland with even more notice for tropical cyclones, and it would provide the Bureau of Meteorology access to provide far better forecasts for Queensland. And I do believe that is why they've got the Willis Island radar up through here, to provide Cairns and Townsville with better cyclone warning systems. And it does work. It worked with Cyclone Yasi, and it will work again. It will certainly provide better forecasts, but especially down towards Mackay and Rockhampton, they kind of don't have that luxury, and it would have been fantastic for Cyclone Debbie. But again, I'm just rambling here at this point. Anyways, we're going to now start talking about these dual tropical low threats, because something has just flipped completely in the forecast models overnight. The axis has actually been hinting at a tropical low developing from a bit of a monsoonal burst that could happen next Tuesday or Wednesday, and this will fly into the West Australian region and probably start developing through Wednesday and Thursday next week. And it looks like the axis is also supporting this becoming a fully fledged tropical cyclone before next weekend. And it looks like it might actually have a shot at becoming quite powerful. It will be a larger system, so it won't be as susceptible to the environment that it is in, but it looks like it will give a red-hot shot at rapid intensification. Just by looking at this forecast here, I have a high degree of confidence in saying that. And you'll also be able to notice a tropical low in the Gulf of Carpentaria here. That is fresh onto the forecast from the Axis G3, but it's not one of these systems that just pops up. It is actually supported. You can see the Eastern Reef supporting a tropical low developing just offshore from PNG. I know it's very hard to see on this imagery, but there is something developing up here, a weak low, and give it a couple of days, this looks like it might try and become a tropical cyclone down towards the Northern Territory and into the Gulf of Carpentaria. So yeah, impacts for Queensland can be expected, and it's not just going to be cyclone impacts for Queensland, it's going to be the rainfall that these systems bring through, that sort of easterly flow that we've seen up here that drives the rainfall accumulations up for far northern Queensland. It looks like we're going to see a pretty wet next week by the looks of things if these tropical lows are to materialise. The ECMWF doesn't really support the wet weather up there. The GFS certainly is. For the GFS to call for 150 millimetres in the 10-day forecast, that's actually quite a lot considering the model resolution that the GFS has. But you can see, especially up towards Lockhart River and Thursday Island, this onshore flow is going to be driving rainfall accumulations up very high, and that's probably going to extend further south as the forecast models refine themselves. The axis, of course, the standout model in terms of maximum rainfall accumulations. They're generally the overestimator of all the forecast models, but on top of the 100 millimetres that can be expected to fall over the next 36 to 48 hours as we get into the Easter long weekend, you can also expect up towards 300 millimetres further up towards Cape Tribulation and Port Douglas as a result of this onshore flow that will likely materialise from this tropical cyclone development in the Gulf of Carpentaria and over the Northern Territory. You can already see the rainfall swathe starting to develop from that tropical cyclone that will head towards Western Australia. It should miss West Australia, but again, it would be an interesting forecast, that's for sure. And yeah, it looks like it develops into a tropical cyclone by next Saturday and into Sunday, so still we're talking 10 days out, very far out into the future. But the fact that this has been on the forecast models for a few days now, especially the West Australian system, it's given me a higher degree of confidence into saying that something will likely happen, and it's also reciprocated amongst other forecast models too. And the same thing with the Gulf of Carpentaria and far northern Queensland system. Taking a look at this one on the axis model, you can see that it is again reciprocated between the axis and the ECMWF. And I do also believe the GFS, yeah, they've all got a similar looking tropical low in terms of size and strength next Friday and Saturday as we get into early April. Now, Gulf of Carpentaria systems aren't too common in April. We don't normally see them in April, but when they do get themselves into the Gulf of Carpentaria, as we saw with tropical cyclone, Megan, they can rapidly intensify very quickly this time of the year because of the favourable sea surface temperatures and upper level atmospheric conditions. So if this does get itself into the Gulf of Carpentaria, it does have the chance of really rapidly intensifying quite significantly. And we've seen it before. I mean, Cyclone Monica was a textbook example of a tropical cyclone able to explosively intensify in the Gulf of Carpentaria. I'm not saying that this system has the same prospects as Cyclone Monica in terms of rapid intensification to become the strongest tropical cyclone in Australian meteorological history, but it certainly will have that chance with the conditions that we will be expecting about that time. Wind shear looking pretty favourable for the tropical cyclone. I'll take a look at that in just a second, but sea surface temperatures, I mean, you don't normally see something like this every year. 30 degrees Celsius, very widespread up in the Gulf of Carpentaria, especially this time of the year. The sea surface temperatures are certainly starting to taper off because you're not seeing those 40 or 42 degree days adjacent to the Gulf of Carpentaria coastline. So 30 degrees is still very warm up here. And the closer you get to the Queensland coastline as well, you're talking 31 to 32 degrees. And even those 1 degree differences, that can multiply energy levels up by 10 or 20%, which is enough to promote rapid intensification in most cases. So this is something we're going to have to keep a very close eye on. Upper level wind shear as well, if we were to go right out to when this tropical cyclone will be forming, it's going to be very low. You're talking maybe about 10 to 15 knots at a worst case scenario for this tropical cyclone. That is going to really promote some rapid intensification. Now, I've talked this system up saying that it is the chance of becoming this monster system. The conditions are all aligning, but tropical cyclones in Australia always find a way to really disappoint us sometimes. Look at tropical cyclone Kirrily. It had the best conditions imaginable. It had the prospect to become a category 4 strength system, but it just wouldn't intensify. So I do believe that there is still the chance that this system stubbornly refuses to intensify, which is good news for land areas that it could possibly impact in around 12 or 13 days time. But again, it's going to need very close coverage and very close monitoring, because if it does decide to form, then it has that chance to rapidly intensify, of course. And again, it certainly could make the most of its conditions in the case that Cyclone Megan did, and it could completely bust out in the case that Cyclone Kirrily did. So again, have to be watching it very closely, and you're not going to find better coverage anywhere else on YouTube, so make sure you are subscribed to this channel, and also leave a like on the video while you're at it. Now, the impacts of far northern Queensland are quite hard to tell at this time. Normally when you get a system developing in the Gulf of Carpentaria or even in the Timor Sea, you see see a strong onshore flow, a strong monsoon trough develop across far northern Queensland, and we haven't really seen that yet on the forecast models here, but it looks like rainfall accumulations just after the Easter long weekend are going to be driven up, and it will move into a wetter than normal phase across far northern Queensland, where we'll likely be seeing daily rainfall accumulations approaching that 100 to 150 millimetres for a couple of days on end. I did say yesterday that we're looking at the last possible rainfall for wet season 2024, but it looks like it's just going to stick around for another week or two as this tropical low develops up across far northern Queensland. So again, it doesn't look like the rainfall is finished just yet, but again, we'll have to be watching this system closely, because the rainfall that we will see next week in tropical northern Queensland will be very dependent on how this tropical cyclone in the Gulf of Carpentaria develops. Even if it develops at all. If it doesn't develop and refuses to form, or it forms in the Timor Sea, or it just merges into the energy that will become the West Australian system, then the rainfall accumulations will be significantly lower across far northern Queensland. So again, expect the possibility of some more rainfall across far northern Queensland, but don't bank on it right now. The forecast can and it will change across the next 7 days. I'll be providing daily coverage on this system as it develops across far northern Queensland, but don't get your hopes up for a very wet week or weekend next week, because again, this system could completely bust down. Now, I do also believe that we should give some coverage to a developing system or developing low pressure area that's going to be moving through parts of Australia, sort of the remnant energy from the South Australian thunderstorms by the looks of things. But next Wednesday and then into Thursday, we're going to be seeing this big humid air mass by the looks of things moving into Queensland and New South Wales. It was actually located over South Australia and Victoria last forecast model at about this time, but it looks like we've just had a big shift in everything weather-wise for Australia by the looks of things, and the ECMWF and also the GFS model are suggesting the low pressure area to be developing across northern New South Wales, impacting areas around Queensland, and will likely drive rainfall accumulations very high towards the end of next week and into next weekend, where we could be seeing up towards 200 millimetres fall up there. Again, not set in stone. I'm not 100% confident in calling this forecast, considering that it has changed dramatically since yesterday. But it will be something that I'll watch, and of course there will be coverage on it as necessary. I did actually highlight this front as being the possible, what I like to call the winter opener, the first front that really brings the winter conditions in. And to a degree, it looks like, even though it's obviously not a winter front, but if you were to look at the GFS forecast model here, it does have that low pressure area, that humid air mass moving through parts of Queensland and New South Wales, and it drags that high pressure system into the Tasman Sea, which in turn, next Saturday, pulls a cold front up from Antarctica, and it looks like by next Saturday we've got a strong cold front moving towards Tasmania, and in its wake we're going to have a very cold air mass moving through. So it looks like next weekend could be quite cool for Eastern Australia in the wake of some very heavy rainfall and also a possible cold front here. And again, something that we'll have to be watching very closely. We could be seeing some sub-zero nights for the first time this winter season for parts of Victoria, New South Wales, and into Tasmania too. And something that we also have been watching out for is the snow line, is how far north this snow line has been getting. Now, I did say yesterday it peaked at about 47 degrees south. Well, now it's about 45 degrees south. So this snow line here, which is where the conditions are conducive for snow to be falling, which of course moves further north as we get closer towards winter, and will eventually extend up towards Tasmania and into Victoria as well, where we'll see some snowy conditions there. Expect snow as well to be moving further north. And it looks like it is really starting to move that further north, which means winter is well and truly on its way. And we will likely be seeing some more wintry conditions and wintry fronts over the next month or so as we start to head into more of this changeover season, March and April. Certainly actually getting through March at this time. I think it's the 28th of March today, so really starting to move through March. And yeah, it is getting closer to winter. Who is excited for winter, by the way? Please let me know if you are excited for winter in the comments section down below. I am stoked for the winter season. I mean, Perth is it is parched right now. I just want some rainfall, some good rainfall to move through the Perth area. And I know we always get it in the winter period, so I just cannot wait for this rainfall to move through Perth in this winter period that we're going to be getting. Hopefully it is a wetter than average winter. I know the Bureau of Meteorology is calling for a drier than average winter, but they also called for a drier than average wet season up in the north. So who knows, they might be completely wrong here, and I'm hoping that they are completely wrong. Because I would love some very healthy rainfall accumulations this winter period. Anyway, so that basically does it for this national weather forecast this morning. It was a very long one, that's for sure. Thank you for sticking through. I do hope you enjoy your Thursday as well. Make sure you're staying safe if you do live in a possible flood impact area, especially across South Australia and the Northern Territory. Make sure you are watching the forecast and the radars very closely as well. For those of you in far northern Queensland, it was a very uncertain forecast in terms of rainfall. It doesn't look like there's much rainfall anymore coming throughout Friday and Saturday, so tomorrow and into the Easter long weekend. But there will likely be a lot more rainfall next week if we do see a tropical low develop in the Gulf of Carpentaria. So again, there will be much more coverage on the channel over the next few days as we see this system potentially develop. And if we see nothing develop, then that rainfall will be completely taken off the cards for far northern Queensland, and we might be calling a wrap on the wet season 2024. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. Their names on screen right now. I do thank you very much for your support. If you too want to get your name mentioned at this part of the video, then please do consider clicking the join button as well. And I thank you very much for your support. That is all from me, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.